Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. As a servant to the people of Queensland and Australia, I'm deeply concerned about the behaviour of some members of the legislature of this government. I'm particularly concerned of behaviours which may constitute criminal liability under the Criminal Code Act of 1995. And I'll give you more on that later. It's important right now to remind people that this government did not win at the last election. Mr Shorten's team lost. The vote across the nation under the Liberal leadership of Scott Morrison was 1% lower than under the leadership of Malcolm Turnbull. There were no miracles involved, other than the miracle of Mr Shorten not being liked and trusted by the Australian people. And the word trust is really important, because people lose confidence in governments when they don't trust governments. And sadly, this government is on the slide when it comes to trust. I'll tell you a story about my limited experience on the Finance and Public Administration Committee. It was the first time I had to do an inquiry as a member of that committee last year, when we inquired into whether or not it was appropriate for two cabinet ministers to take a job with some of the people who they dealt with as cabinet ministers in less than 18 months after they resigned from the government. In fact, I think one of them even had a job before they left the cabinet, and they went straight into that job. No 18 months. And then we had other stories earlier on. Well, in sitting beside my Labor and Liberal colleagues, interviewing Mr Martin Parkinson, who had a long career as Secretary of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, I inquired about his powers on the investigation. And Mr Parkinson initially let everyone think that he had done a solid investigation. And as I persisted and persisted and persisted, Mr Martin Parkinson was finally left with nowhere to go, and he confessed that in his role as the investigator appointed by the Prime Minister to look into the appropriateness or look into compliance with ministerial code of conduct, that he didn't have any investigation powers. Here was the Prime Minister, Mr Morrison, appointing the head of Prime Minister and Cabinet to investigate, while he knew that the investigator had no investigatory powers. What kind of investigation does that bring? Does that give me any reassurance? Not in the least. All it showed me was that we would not have learnt that had I not persisted and persisted and persisted. Surely it's not about covering up, it's about being open. Because when the Prime Minister loses the trust of the people, the Prime Minister will start to be undermined. So no investigatory powers in the head of the Prime Minister's office or Cabinet to conduct investigations. And yet when the sports rort hit the headlines, the Prime Minister toughed it down for about 2 weeks, and then, after realising that wouldn't meet the criteria for confidence from the Australian people, he then appointed the successor as head of department to do an investigation. Wonderful! He forgot to mention that the man doesn't have any investigatory powers. So this may explain some of the absurd outcomes of these internal investigations, nominally held when considering the conduct of ministers and past ministers, including Mr Christopher Pyne, Ms Julie Bishop, and more recently, Senator Bridget McKenzie. So what is the value, I ask, Mr Acting Deputy President, of these nominal investigations that have no power to call witnesses or to go beyond merely asking for information, and no power to get answers or to make definitive conclusions? What kind of government is happy with doing that? What kind of government sets that up? The current requirements for accountability are clearly inadequate, and this must change. When such systems are lax, perpetrators can rightly sense that they're immune from accountability. And then, of course, when they've got no chance of being held accountable, they quite often are enticed to abuse that trust. One nation will not stand by and let the government get away with it. The Australian public deserve better from their elected representatives, and we will always hold the government accountable, always. Good government, Mr. Acting Deputy President, is transparent, honest, accountable, and the lack of accountability of this government is becoming clearer to everyday Australians, and that is not good for our country. People rightly feel disgusted by the breaches of trust when politicians are caught out making decisions to clearly benefit themselves and their mates, whether that be financially or through power or through career or through votes, to the detriment of those who have a genuine need that has not been met. Because people lose when corruption occurs. Not only in the area of sports, this government has failed the community broadly on so many other matters. The government continues to act with the arrogance of the powerful, as if above the law. They continue to act with self-interest and they attempt to avoid scrutiny. This is particularly abhorrent when so many Australians are feeling vulnerable right now. After the resignation of Senator Mackenzie over the sports rorts, one would think that the Nationals would have learnt their lesson. I mean, they're clearly embarrassed, and so they should be. However, just hours after the resignation of Senator Mackenzie, Minister Littleproud said in an interview with the ABC, and let me quote his exact words, "What people have to understand is you might get a warm, fuzzy feeling voting for a micro-party. They won't be cutting the cheques. We cut the cheques," says the Nationals' new deputy leader. What an outrageous thing to say, just hours after his predecessor as deputy has resigned. Same day. I can only hope that Minister Littleproud regrets that slip of arrogance. And that's what drives it, arrogance. Arrogance that they won't be caught. Senator Mackenzie resigned as Deputy Leader of the Nationals for treating the taxpayers' chequebook as the Nationals' own multi-million-dollar slush fund. That evening, Minister Littleproud was elevated to Deputy Leader of the Nationals and immediately declared, "Business as usual. I'll keep signing the cheques." The lesson has clearly not been learned. It seems that governments in this country at federal level, be it Liberal or Labor, do not value good governance. Taxpayers deserve and expect better. One Nation is always prepared to stand up and speak out and to call to account those whose behaviour is dishonourable and dishonest. We will continue to do so. And that's the fact that we benefit from not being part of the political establishment. And it seems quite often, and look at the last election, that Liberal and Labor want to kill off the smaller parties, maintain their duopoly because there's limited accountability. And we need real accountability from real choice. We put Australia and Australians first. One Nation will continue to advocate strongly to restore prosperity to Australia for the Australian people. Our country is inherently rich, and yet it's being choked by government, poor governance, and has been doing so for the last 20 years. As part of the solution to this ongoing list of integrity failures from our politicians, I call for the introduction of an independent commission similar to ICAC. This will set an enforceable code of conduct and restore the integrity of Parliament. Senator Gallagher has, in her motion, listed a litany of examples of poor behaviour in the motion, all worthy of consideration. I could go to them, but there are 13 of them. And that doesn't include some obvious ones in terms of sloppy governance. A full consideration of them would make the basis for a book, and all these listed breaches of good faith occurred in just the last 6 months. 6 months. A constituent called us and suggested to us that Senator Mackenzie's actions may have constituted an abuse of public office, being an offence under the Criminal Code Act 1995, the Commonwealth that is. Section 142.2 sets out the offence, where if a Commonwealth public official, which includes members of the legislature, exercises any influence that the official has in the official's capacity as a Commonwealth public official, or engages in any conduct in the exercise of the official's duties as a Commonwealth public official, with the intention of dishonestly obtaining a benefit for himself or herself or for another person, or dishonestly causing a detriment to another person, they will have committed an offence. These issues should be investigated by a formal inquiry into all the circumstances supporting the sports fraud affair. Until then, the Prime Minister's name will remain under a dark, dark cloud. And I would have thought that the Prime Minister would want to maintain the name of the Prime Minister's name, the sanctity of that office. He is bringing disrepute to that office by leaving it under a cloud. The Prime Minister, I suggest, should be the one wanting this cleared, unless he has something to hide. The bottom line is the need for our government to treat the taxpayers with respect and to be held to account when they act outside what is considered good conduct. And to want to do so. Surely an honest leader would want to do so, would want to make sure his or her name is clear. So there comes another level in this debate, and that is one of intent. What is the intent driving this government? Does the Prime Minister, who comes from a marketing background, simply want to look good or to do good? Is this going to be a government that does good or just tries to look good? Intent is the key to the questioning. Intent is the key to the quality of our energy, our engagement, and ultimately our service to the people of our country. Senator Antic, a few minutes ago, said that Australia is now a world leader in intermittent energy. Wonderful, he says. But he doesn't tell us that that's what's led to us having the highest electricity prices in the world. And who pays for that lack of integrity that's driving that? The people do. Anyone using electricity. That's not just employers, it's not just families, it's the employees who have lost their jobs to countries burning our hydrocarbon fuels, gas and coal, overseas, and despite the transport costs, they sell electricity cheaper than we do after our government rorts and subsidies feathering the intermittent energies, wind and solar. The fact is that the intermittent energy increase in this country has been driven by nonsense. There is no data underpinning it that proves that we need it. We are paying high prices for electricity to indulge in a whim. So it's not just these behaviours that Senator Gallagher has listed to her credit. It's the whole role of governance in this country. In summary, One Nation calls for the establishment of an independent commission to establish and enforce a code of conduct for parliamentarians in the style of the ICAC. In addition, we call for a formal inquiry into the recent events leading up to Senator Mackenzie's conduct and resignation from Cabinet, an independent inquiry. These two actions will go a long way to ensuring accountable government to the benefit of all Australians. And as much as I agree with Senator Antic's list of achievements from this government, the Liberal government over the last 2 terms, achievements do not replace integrity. Because ultimately, when that integrity is lost, achievements in the future vanish. And what we need to do in this country, at federal level in particular, is to restore people's confidence. Thank you, Mr. Acting Deputy President.
Senator Polley.
Yes, thank you.